recording. This public meeting is being recorded and published on the Council's website to improve access to the meeting for our community. The recording will be published and will be retained by Council in accordance with Council's legal obligations. As a visitor in the public gallery or online, your presence may be recorded. It is my privilege to respectfully acknowledge the traditional custodians of our wonderful country. We give our thanks to all our ancestors whose vision, determination, innovation and resilience built our prosperous, inclusive and democratic country. We acknowledge that we are the proud inheritors of this legacy and we accept the challenge to continue to nourish and nurture our communities. And we pledge to work to implement and enhance opportunities for the benefit of future generations, our children, their children into the future.
Excuse me, Madam Mayor, but we can barely hear you.
I'm sorry. Almighty God,
thank you.
We humbly ask Thee to bless and guide this Council in its deliberations so that we can truly preserve the welfare of the people whom we serve. I'll move to the acceptances of apologies and granting of leave of absence. Do we have any of those? No. Item number 7, we have a citizenship ceremony later on in March. Number 7, confirmation of minutes. Would someone like to read that? Thank you, Councillor Benson. Thank you, Councillor Fitzpatrick. Are we all in agreement that the minutes were? Thank you. Number 8 is a conflict of interest disclosure. Those. Receipt of petitions, hearing of deputations, councillor reports, executive services number 12. And we move, without any of those, we move to item number 13.1, which is the council plan actions and indicators quarter to October to December 2024.
Thank you, Mayor Grant. So this first report, 13.1, is for Council to meet its obligations to provide quarterly reporting on our delivery of the actions and indicators contained within its 4-year Council plan. The Council plan is nearing the end of this current 4-year plan. You might be aware of the consultation process underway to develop the new plan and encourage anyone to register for the workshops that are coming up if you'd like to be a part of that. But this report just asks in the recommendation that Council notes the Q2 results for the Council plan strategic indicators and actions as contained in these plans.
Thank you, Director Brindley. Do we have a question to this particular item? If not, councillors, we have a recommendation. Do I have someone to move? Councillor Fitzpatrick? Something to say? Thank you.
Moving further, pretty straightforward.
So, councillors, we have a recommendation moved by Councillor Fitzpatrick and seconded by Councillor Benton. Are we all in agreement? Thank you, councillors. Move to the next item, which is the 13.2, the 2024 to 2025 quarter 2 forecast review. Director Brindley.
Thank you. So again, each quarter Council reports on its financial position, so year to date versus budget, and then its updated forecast for the year. The main movements in this quarterly forecast are reflective of additional grant funding received, which under the accounting rules, the rules about whether you recognise those versus the delivery of the projects. And in the capital work side, an increase primarily reflective of the expansion of the flood mitigation strategy and design programme. So the overall recommendation for Council to improve in the quarter 2 forecast review includes the increase of the projected full-year accounting surplus from 13.41 million to 14.8 million, the increase in capital works expenditure by $450,000 to $31.93 million, and to also note the environmental upgrade agreement quarterly statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Renly. Do we have a question from the audience on this particular item? Councillors, do we have someone to do? Councillor Ford, thank you. Someone to second? Councillor Ford, would you like to speak? Okay, we've got a recommendation that's been moved by Councillor Fuller and moved by Councillor Councillor Maxwell. We all in agreement? Okay. We move to item 14.1. Rural City of Wangaratta Waste and Resource Recovery Strategy 2023-2027. Director Goonan.
Thank you, Mayor. This report is presented to Council to endorse the Waste and Resource Recovery Strategy. The strategy has been developed in response to the rapidly changing waste management environment and the legislative and policy framework being implemented by the state. The strategy sets a direction for development and delivery of waste management and resource recovery services for the rural city through to 2027. The strategy has had broad public input and feedback and is now presented to Council to endorse. Recommendation is on the screen that Council adopts the Rural City of Wangaratta Waste and Resource Recovery Strategy.
Thank you. Before I ask for any questions from the audience, I have a question from Luke Davies, who asked the following questions for Council. Regarding the Council's organic processing facility, the Waste and Resource Recovery Strategy mentions that output from the facility has been limited, which is, and his question one, why is this so? What is the problem with the quality of the compost being produced? And the second question is, can this compost be made available to the residents of Wangaratta for use in our gardens?
Thank you for your questions, Luke. The main reason that there is limited output is that a large proportion of the compost is used for internal projects as it currently exists, which happily saves money for our ratepayers. As we increase our inputs, our outputs will grow. There are no quality issues with compost. In fact, the improvements that we've made in our infrastructure provide an even higher grade product suitable for commercial farming. Meeting the compliance requirements to sell the compost to external markets does take some time. With the new equipment, we can maintain a higher quality product and remove more of the microplastics, etc. The answer to the question with regards to whether it will be made available for residents of Wangaratta, as outlined in the strategy, Council officers are focusing on finding suitable markets for the compost, particularly commercial markets. Currently, there is no infrastructure on site to allow public collection of the compost.
Thank you, Director Goonan. There's another question here from Mary Ann Sargent, who asked the following question with regard to the waste and resource recovery strategy. Council officers will develop an education plan acknowledging education plays a pivotal role in improving waste and recycling outcomes. Question one, will Council employ a dedicated waste and recycling education officer? And question two, who will be conducting the outreach education efforts required to improve recycling outcomes?
Thank you for your questions, Marianne. They're both great questions. Council officers are currently in the process of advertising for a full-time waste project officer. This role will have a focus on waste education along with other projects within the waste management field. The outreach such efforts will be a collaborative effort across the waste team. However, the primary responsibility for education will lie with the waste project officer.
Thank you, Director Goodman. And do we have any questions from the audience on this particular item? Could you come forward, please? Sandra, state your name and ask your question, please.
My name is Cassandra. So, my question is regarding the possibility of a future tip shop, and the public consultation raised the issue and it's sort of acknowledged in a document. My questions are, firstly, are there planning discussions happening now about how to install a tip shop at the transfer station? And my second question, the document mentions a future materials recovery facility. Is this a reference to a future tip shop?
Director Goodman.
Thank you for the questions. So, as part of the materials recovery process, and in particular when our landfill is full, we will need to cart all the materials from Wangaratta to another location. So that actually means that we will need to put in additional sorting facilities at the Wangaratta landfill, so that's the reference for that. At that point in time, then we would be having a conversation about what does the community want to see within that facility. So that's a full walking floor refuse facility, so that takes account of all of our waste recovery. The idea of having a tip shop at the current site is not being explored as part of the policy.
No other questions? No other questions from the audience? Councillors, we have a recommendation before us. Would someone like to move? Councillor Fuller. So, Councillor Fuller's moved. Did you want to speak to the?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just briefly acknowledging the effort that went into this strategy writing and construction. It's a very nice document, easy read and appreciate it.
Very much appreciated. Councillor Maxwell. Okay, councillors, we have a recommendation put forward by Councillor Fuller and seconded by Councillor Maxwell. Are we all in agreement? We move to item 14.2, which is the Community Asset Committee nominations.
Thank you, Anne. This report is presented to Council to endorse the nominees of volunteer committees for the management under our Community Asset Committee instrument of delegation. There are additional community members who requested spots on local committees that are vacant, and council officers are in support of that for the following recreation hall, etc. So Whitfield Recreation, Old Murmungie Hall, Bowman's Murmungie, Edai Harbour, Everton Hall, Oxley Shire Hall, Myree Hall, Moyu Soldiers Memorial Hall, and the Eldorado Town Hall. The recommendation is that these are endorsed and disclosed by council.
Thank you, Director Goonan. We've got someone to move that recommendation. Well, yes, any questions from the gallery? Very much an operational one. Councillor Russell, thank you, and Councillor Fitzpatrick, thank you. Councillor Russell, you'd like to speak to? And
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to thank these volunteers that treat these assets as if they're their own, and I think it's just wonderful that all the volunteer work that the community does looking after these spaces. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
thank you. Councillor Russell.
I think Councillor Russell summed it up perfectly.
Yes. Would anyone else like to speak? Councillor Fuller?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having seen two of these halls in action on Australia Day just recently, I am excited to see some of the names that are on this list do not have grey hair, which is exciting to see that committees are recruiting and succession planning. And it might seem like I'm being ageist in saying that, but there are a lot of these volunteers that put multiple years in, and it's great to see that they're actually evolving and picking up new faces along the way to help with these processes.
Would anyone else like to make a comment? I'll put the recommendation to the vote. Everyone in favour? Thank you. Now, Councillor Bussell, would you like to read out the names of the people that have been appointed to this?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think it's wonderful that there's so many volunteers here, so just bear with me, there's a few names to go. Whitfield Recreation Reserve, K.O. Kane, Graham Stanier, Old Monkey Hall, Cecilia Fletcher, Murray Bennett, Bowman's Mamungi, Cecilia Fletcher, Edo Upper Hall, Maurice Holmes, Helen O'Donoghue, James Kiley, Monica Evans, Susan Lowe, Everton Hall and Recreation Reserve, Kate Owen, Oxley Shire Hall, Arthur Parker, Neil Barclay, Barbara Gotti, Myrie Hall, Carol Knert, Sharon Jarrett, Paul Collis, Nicole Warnier, Ken Olson, Kath Fox, Anne Lacey, Jeffrey Lacey, Moya Sullivan, Maura Hall, Leanne Burge, Travis Wright, Josie Sampson, Peter Shanley, Helen Sampson, Merida Johnson, Neil Jarrett, Damien Curry, Regina Callaway, Darren Birtles, Maxwell Baker, Eldorado Town Hall, Doug Olmedo. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bussell. Thank you very much, and congratulations to all those people that have put their hands up to serve their community and be part of keeping community facilities in good condition. Thank you again. We now move to item 15.1, which is sustainability and culture, and the item is the Wangaratta Planning Scheme Amendment C83, consideration of submissions and the next step in the amendment process. And I'll ask Director of Sustainability and Culture, Stephen Swart.
Thank you. The proposed planning scheme amendment implements the recommendations of the rural part of the adopted low density and rural residential strategy. That strategy was adopted by Council in December 2021. The amendment proposes to make changes to local policy zoning and overlays. The local policy changes are applicable to the entire municipality, while the zone and overlay changes focus on areas in Glenrowan, Middlewar and Oxley. The planning scheme amendment was exhibited publicly between August and September 2024, and during this period of time we received 16 submissions, some of those supporting the amendment, some requesting changes, and 2 with outstanding objections to the amendment. This report is presented to Council to consider the submissions received and the matters raised in response to the public exhibition process. Council basically has 3 options under the Planning Environment Act when it comes to considering submissions to a planning scheme amendment. The first option is to make the changes requested. The second option is to abandon the amendment or part of the amendment. And the third option is to refer the amendment to an independent panel. Officers recommend to refer the amendment to a panel, as some of the requested changes could not be accommodated.
Thank you. Before I ask the Council to move in second, I'll ask for questions from the audience. I have rather a detailed question here from Richard Hughes. He's asked 5 parts, which I won't read out in total, but what I will read out is the request to Council is to A, retain the current Glenrowan overlay, and B, rezone the appropriate areas within the overlay. And Director Swart, if you could provide a response to that, please.
Thank you for those questions. The matter is being reported to this Council meeting to consider the next stage of the planning scheme amendment process, with the recommendation to refer the amendment to an independent panel. The questions raised by Mr. Hughes about the planning scheme amendment and the strategy that provides the justification for this amendment will be considered as part of the independent panel process should council decide to refer the matter to a panel. Submitters will have an opportunity to participate in the panel process, and the panel will make recommendations to council about the merits of the amendment.
Thank you, Director Swart. Do we have any questions from the audience on this particular? If you could come forward and ask your question, state your name.
Jenny Hart. My question is, under what grounds would council consider a late submission to this amendment? Under the Planning Act, I believe late submissions can be considered, but I can't decipher from the Act it seems to imply that it's at council's discretion, and I'm wondering what council's discretionary measures would be.
Yeah, we typically are pretty lenient when it comes to that. We try to accept submissions right to the point in time where decisions are being made. This matter, if council decides to refer it to a panel, any late submission would probably have to be made to the panel, and it would be at their discretion whether they would consider it.
So the process is to make a submission to the panel or to the council?
I think both. Yes. If that process isn't very clear within the Act. Yes.
Yes, it's hard to decide. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any other questions on this particular item? Councillors, we've got a recommendation in front of us. Would like to move that? Thank you, Councillor Benson. Would someone like to second Councillor Fuller? Thank you. Councillor Benson, would you like to speak to this, please?
I only to say that this is really the process that's got to go through in relation to the submissions that we've received, and two that haven't been able to be accommodated, how did you get that by a third party?
Can't hear.
Councillor Benson, yeah, we can't hear you.
Start again.
Much better, thank you.
This is really a process that we're going through in relationship to under the instructions, really the minister to actually come to resolve the submissions that can't be accommodated at the moment. So they're just housekeeping in a lot of ways moving forward. So, looking into the process, I'll put it that way.
Thank you, Councillor Benton. Councillor Fuller, would you like to speak? I think Councillor Benton, as he explained, this is just part of the process. Council will tonight consider whether we will send this particular item to the panel for their decision, an independent panel. So, councillors, we have a recommendation that Councillor Benton put forward and Councillor Fuller seconded. Are we all in agreement? Thank you. So this particular item will go now to the panel. We move to the next item, which is 15.2, Draft Events and Attractions Strategy.
Thank you. Council's current events and attraction strategy dates back to 2018. A draft strategy has been prepared to replace that 2018 strategy. The draft strategy was prepared in consultation with the community and stakeholders, and it identifies strategic objectives and sets the direction for future events in the rural city of Wangaratta. It also includes a number of actions to achieve the objectives within the draft strategy. The draft strategy is ready for further comments or further community input, and officers recommend that council endorse the strategy for public exhibition.
Do we have any questions from the audience on this particular item? If not, councillors, we have a recommendation. Who would like to move that recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Maxwell. Councillor. Councillor Maxwell, would you like to speak to the
Thank you so much, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to acknowledge that a huge amount of work from staff has gone into developing this strategy. Events are so incredibly important in our community as we gather and connect with each other, and would like to acknowledge the work that's gone in from staff. Thank you.
And I'd certainly second Councillor Winter's comment. And this is an opportunity for the community to input, because events are very much a part of what the rural city of Wangaratta does. And I think testament to that is the last 6 weeks we've had a number of really outstanding events helping the rural city of Wangaratta that have brought people together, connected people, and this strategy certainly speaks to what we would like to do in the future, and I think to make it an absolutely relevant document, I would really appreciate it if people would take the time to read it and make comment if they've got the time. So we've got a recommendation moved by Councillor Maxwell and seconded by Councillor Winters. Are we all in favour? Thank you, councillors. We now move to item 15.3, which is the CBD car parking payment system. And Director Swart.
Thank you. Having sufficient good quality and accessible car parking available contributes to an attractive CBD to the benefit of both visitors and businesses. Council has a paid parking system in place in the Wangaratta CBD to help cover the costs of providing and maintaining car parking on a user-placed basis. Paid parking has been in place in the Wangaratta CBD for many years. The current parking payment system consists of 72 parking machines and the option of paying with the EasyPark app. The current car parking machines are at the end of their life. This report presents options for modernising the payment system and recommends reducing the number of machines to 16 and continuing with the EasyPark app.
Thank you, Director Swart. I've got a question here before I open up to the audience. A question from Kieran Clem, who question. Did Council have any input regarding the lease payments and the change of ownership? Is there a sunset clause in the contract, or will Council be liable for the index payments forever? And these refer to Mr. Clem's questions about maintaining income from parking payments to contribute to providing and maintaining car parking in the CBD, including cost association with the coastal parking contract. And Council will need to absorb more of the cost associated with providing and maintaining car parking in the CBD, including cost associated with the coastal car park. So those questions, which is sort of all over the place here.
Excuse me, Madam Clerk. If you don't mind, we're just experiencing a bit of language and behaviour before that's answered. Would you mind just reminding the
Yes, indeed. If you would be good enough to.
I shall certainly do that. I am disgusted in what's going on. Absolutely disgusted.
Well, you're quite free to leave.
I am quite free to leave, but I shall return.
That's fine.
Good evening, people. I don't like liars and extortionists.
Now, Councillor, Director Swart, there's been a bit of a question and answer here from Mr. Clem. Are you able to provide a response to that?
Yes, I can certainly do that. So the first question talks about the possibility that the coastal has changed hands or, been sold to a new owner. And the question is, does the council have any input regarding the lease payments at a change of ownership? The response is that council has no record of the property changing ownership, and it has not been approached by the owners about payment under the parking agreement. The second question is whether there's a sunset clause in that contract or will council be liable for index payments forever? The answer to that is that that agreement commenced in 2014 and it's in place for a period of 20 years with the option of being extended. If not extended, the agreement will come to an end in 2034.
Thank you, Director Swart. There's another question here from Guy Robinson, and I just wonder whether I should read that all out, or he does refer to the fact that council, whether or not, would be keeping parking meters. He would like to ask whether the revenue raised from parking meters substantially exceeds the cost of meter attendance, clerical times, etc. If the parking revenue is not a significant source of funding for council, then he suggests it should be discontinued. The disadvantages of local metered parking include discouragement of perpetual customers, bad council relations, additional pressure on free parking spots. He has asked council for costs and revenue for metered parking. He's told this information is not being collected. If that is still the case, and if council wishes to continue metered parking, I'd like to request that the decision to continue is accompanied by a decision to begin as soon as possible, reporting separately or at least the revenue from meters. This would give a reasonable basis for estimating the profit or loss from metering because of the annual cost, because the annual cost would be fairly easily and accurately estimated. Also, I would request that the decision to continue metering will be reviewed, say, in 12 months when a better data is available. So you've got the question in front of you, Director Swart, so if you provide a response to that, please.
Thank you for that question. Council's annual report for the 2023-24 financial year lists revenue from parking as $317,000 and includes revenue from paid parking and parking permits, but excludes fines. Part of that question was also about, what effort or costs are involved in chasing unpaid fees. As parking is paid up front, there are no additional costs associated with following up unpaid fees. Administrative and maintenance costs associated with parking meters are lower than the revenue generated. Staff costs will remain regardless of whether they are paid parking and have been included in the cost analysis of all options presented to council today.
Thank you, Director Swart. Do we have any questions from the audience on this particular item? Come forward, Gary, just introduce yourself and ask the question, please.
Good evening, Gary Beale. My question is, has there been a formal consultation process?
Switch your mic on, Gary.
Cool. My apologies, thanks, Brian. Sorry, I'll start again. Good evening, my name is Gary Beale. My question is, has there been a formal consultation process with the CBD businesses as well as the users being ratepayers, regional visitors and tourists?
There has not been a formal consultation process with those groups that you mentioned there. This is about replacing an existing payment system. And typically under those circumstances, we wouldn't go through a consultation process as you described.
Yes.
In that same theme, it was stated to the benefit of visitors and businesses. So how can you ascertain the benefit to visitors and businesses if you have not gone through a formal consultation process?
The context of saying to the benefit of visitors and businesses was to say that having sufficient, good quality, accessible car parking available in the CBD is a benefit to businesses and visitors.
And I think it's worth reiterating Director Swart's comments about the fact that this is a replacement system. This was flagged in the middle of last year that the parking meters were in and the parking machines were needed to be replaced. I'm interested to know that I've had very little feedback from the broader community, and we are constantly
in consultation on a whole variety of issues, including parking and parking movements and the availability of parking. And I think whenever council considers any issue, parking is front and centre of what we will consider, and we'll be considering something later on the agenda that also refers back to parking availability. So it's very much front and centre, and the businesses have not been forthcoming in expressing any concern, positive or negative.
As you know, I've represented businesses, I've provided supervision associated with businesses, and I have been to 100 businesses. Everyone I've spoken to is against paid parking. Just in relation there to the comments regarding feedback, the general view is that this is just going to get rubber stamped, and the voice of the businesses and the community will not be heard. So,
Thank you, Gary.
oh, sorry, and then, sorry to direct your comment, Director, as well. You made mention that it's about keeping good quality car parks. May I remind you that we have car parks in the hospital precinct. We also have in the West End, in Hampton Street, Munn Street, Urunga. I believe all good quality at time limited free parking. So I don't know how you distinguish the two.
Sorry, I'm not, is that a question or just a statement?
I just don't know how you distinguish the difference between CBD quality car parks, which is paid, versus the non-paid car parks, which exist.
Well, the mere fact that it's the CBD, I think that's the essential difference.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions from the audience?
Madam Mayor, Adrian Fox.
Yeah.
The Secretary of Business.
Just hit the microphone. Thank you.
I'm the Secretary of Business, Wangaratta Chamber of Commerce. I wrote to the councillors yesterday outlining what I now feel is a system that's way too complicated. After I presented that system to my members and colleagues, they all said, keep it simple, that system is too complicated. So the end result is that the Wangaratta public, the businesses and citizens, they just want free parking with a time limit, no meters, no smartphone apps. So my question, Madam Mayor, is along with what Gary said, is could someone on the panel comment on how in tune the proposed motion is with the wishes of the Wangaratta public? I know you've just said that you're not actually following the wishes of the Wangaratta public, you're replacing any existing system.
Exactly.
But
exactly.
does that mean we're not following the wishes of the Wangaratta public?
We're replacing an existing system, upgrading the system. And I think, perhaps to remind you too, there's probably no such thing as free parking, because whatever council does in terms of parking comes at a cost. And if we don't obtain revenue from parking, which is a user-pay system, then we've got to find the revenue in other ways. And I think you would be very much aware that council now has a rate cap, which then very much puts the lid on the amount of money that we can raise. And given that this particular system of user pays for parking has been in place for how many years, since the 60s at least, if not before, then it would be reasonable that we would continue it. And I think it exists in most regional cities that there is some form of paid parking that allows the council to obtain revenue, to provide for works around parking. And in some councils in Melbourne, in fact, parking and particularly revenue that obtains from compliance exceeds the amount of money that we will raise in rates.
Yes.
So it's something that council has to consider, that if we don't collect the money this way, we have to collect it another way.
And that amount, is that of the four options that were put down, the one that was like the worst net result was option 4, 1.5 million over 8 years, so that's almost 200,000 per year. Does that include the loss of revenue? It does. Well, I don't know. I would have thought we could afford 200,000 a year and give everybody free parking.
Thank you. Thanks, Adrian. Is that your question?
That's it.
Thank you very much. Okay, is there any other questions from the audience? State your name, please.
Trevor?
Trevor who?
Where? With this paid parking, is it going to be cash? Is the next option still be cash?
Well, council is looking at a number of options and we'll be
because,
considering that today.
Because some people don't have data on their phones.
I understand that.
Or don't have,
Yes.
that type of thing.
Yeah.
And there's elderly people in this capital area, what can't use cash.
Thank you, Trevor. Any other questions from the audience? If you could come forward and state your name, ask a question.
Brian Fox, thank you, Warren. I just want to repeat one of the questions that my son who preceded me had on the sheet of paper that most of you have got. And that is, and I'd like you to tell me your answer. If you choose to purchase new machines, change will be impossible for maybe 5 years. If you think I'm wrong, tell me. If you'd be silent, well, then I'd take silence as agreement. Thank you.
We're considering the options.
Thank you.
Right.
My next point is that we've learned a few things tonight that I didn't know before. So I'm asking you, what's the rush? Why can't we leave this matter on the table and bring it up at the next council meeting for a vote by these 7 councillors? And during that time, I'm asking you to write me a letter as the chairman of the Chamber of Commerce explaining your point of view of how you match the comparison between parking revenue and the council budget. I mean, there's all sorts of things in the budget. There's the swimming pool, the PAC. You write me a letter, I'll send it to my members, and I'll bring you back an answer. But I'm asking you, madam, do not put this motion to the vote tonight. There is no logical reason for haste. I thank you for your time.
Well, thank you, Mr. Fox. You're actually not the decision maker here tonight. We will be doing that. And I will ask for any other questions from the audience. If you could come forward, please.
As part of this process, you make references to the fact that the parking revenue helps maintain the parking spaces within the CBD. I currently have become a carer for a disabled father and noticed recently that a lot of the disabled car parks now are moving location because the requirements under the disabled parking have changed, needing more space around them, etc., which is reducing the number of car parks within our CBD, and our beautiful trees that are in our CBD are actually hampering the usage of a lot of our car spaces by bigger vehicles that most of us are driving because of our rural situations. Is there a direct correlation between the income that is generated from our parking meters to the direct maintenance of our CBD car parks?
Director Swart.
There's a direct correlation between the income we get from a paid system and some of the costs associated with providing car parking. Tonight we talked about the contractual arrangement, for instance. There's also some staff involved in that. In terms of the maintenance of specific areas or how they are used, I don't think they are. I could think of a direct correlation.
And the other thing that I would like to use a statement, I know it's not a question, is that I am an active business owner within Wangaratta, and I feel frustrated that there's been many people making references that business owners have been consulted and making sweeping statements based on our behalf. Whilst I know that they're generally speaking, I generally have the opinion that parking meters with a very small limited number of parking within the CBD allows the movement of vehicles so that shops are not left with cars parked out in front all day. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dunstan. Appreciate those comments. Are there any other questions from the audience before I ask the councillors to move the recommendation? Councillor Bustle.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have an alternative motion. I'll just read this out. Endorses the replacement of the current parking payment system in the Wangaratta CBD with the Easy Park app as the only payment method. Point 2, puts appropriate and proactive arrangements in place to assist uptake by new users of the app. Point 3, requests officers to consider and implement a simple alternative payment or permit system for committee members that do not have an appropriate device to use the Easy Park or are unable to use the Easy Park. And point 4, which I've added, is quarterly updates of how the system is going and a review in June 2026 of the report on the previous 12 months.
Thank you, Councillor Bustle. Would someone like to second that? Councillor Benton? Councillor Bustle, would you like to speak to the motion that you put forward?
Yes, thanks, Madam Mayor. I don't know a single person that ever loves a parking meter. And I do want to keep this simple. And I think time has come to change. And I don't want to waste money on machines. It's just a waste of money. And this parking system may well be cheaper for the people that don't spend much time in the park. And I'd rather spend the savings on helping people adapt to a new parking system. I think that would be much more proactive than what it would be to waste money on a parking machine. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bustle. Councillor Benton, would you like to speak to?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Considering what all the options over probably the last month, and reading some of the emails and some of the public comments made, and as I like to agree with the Mayor, there's no such thing as free parking. You've either got to pay for it some way or the line, whether you're going to not be charged indirectly through your own rates. And there is a parking establishment in the town. We all know that the parking council has a contractual agreement and has to be met each year. So that'll either have to be absorbed into the body if we don't go down the path, having to be absorbed out of the rates. And this is a substantial amount that I don't think that we should just all up, and we're only talking about street parking, pavement parking, by Easy Park. We have a configuration across the CBD of time right through, and then very closely, but all day parking. Just so we can be able to make sure that we have level playing field, and I don't think that anyone ever really used the term equity neutrality yet. Because the business owner running a situation away, contractual way, we must be able to make sure that we're not undercurrent and have an effect on his business. So we've got to make sure we do things right in relationship to the parking system in the reasonable charges that we agreed to by both parties. Going forward, the permit system allows for people like me that aren't too tech-savvy. We have got, but then again, you go down to Chemist Warehouse or everywhere else, you've got to get your medicine on the tap, you get your weather on the map, you've got emergencies on the app, so it's fast approaching the time that we are going to have to be on, be able to use it. And the Council of us has said the outlay to replace just the 16 parking meters that we read the reports, it will be around about $200,000, plus a $51 a month fee that we have to make sure the licence keeps going. At least we can start to be able to be flexible in using this facility going forward, so we can get rid of the parking machines, and it will be another council another time, what they adopt in 8 years' time. I can thank the others to ensure that the community that uses the facility will be subject to time parking the same as the permanent people going forward. I think it's the most fair and equitable way we can go forward without inverting the budget too much further. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Benton. Would any of the council like to speak to the Councillor Maxwell?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have to say that I'd like to thank Councillor Russell for putting this motion forward, and I have to say that particularly as a new councillor, this is a topic that I actually agonised over, rightly or wrongly, and I think the one thing I kept coming back to was a common sense approach, and does this pass the pub test? We have a system that is in desperate need of upgrade, which is going to be incredibly costly. We have younger generations who use their smartphone. Some of the older generations are learning to use smartphones. The Easy Park app, I think, is a way forward. So to see that as a community, we are not actually going backwards. 317,000 is not a minimal amount in revenue. It really is a significant amount of money in our current economic times. We know that the likelihood of receiving future grants is probably minimal, and I think as a council, it's our responsibility to ensure that what we are doing moving forward is in the best interest of our community. I have not had one business come forward to me saying why they do not like paid parking. If somebody asked me the question, do you want to pay for parking or do you not want to pay for parking? Of course I don't want to pay for parking. But the reality is, without paid parking, we will digress in our ability to ensure that those parking spaces are maintained, that staff are employed, and all the other obligations that come along with us having the opportunity to park outside of a business or somewhere else for free in the CBD. I do believe that there has been no reasonable justification for not wanting parking. And as I said, as painstaking as this decision has been, I think it's a decision that has had to be made. And our revenue is important to sustain our community.
Thank you, Councillor Maxwell. Well said and well. Councillor Winters.
Thank you so much, Madam Mayor. This has been a really hard decision, and we've spent hours discussing all of the options, the various impacts these will have on community members, particularly some of the most vulnerable in our community, and I've taken this decision really seriously. I'd like to thank Kieran, Guy, Gary, Adrian, Trevor, Ryan and Anne for their questions, and I have heard overwhelmingly through people contacting online and in person that community members want free parking,
and only a few weeks ago, without all of the information, I would have agreed with them. Unfortunately, there are bigger, serious considerations to this option. Paid parking helps to fund the essential services that council deliver without shifting the financial burden onto all ratepayers, and I can't in all good conscience make a decision that puts the council into debt, risks vital services for the community, and reduces the projects available within our municipality. There was a comment made that $1.56 million loss over 8 years wasn't a lot of money, and I respectfully disagree. It's a lot to me. I believe having options available for those who don't have a phone or are unable to use an app, a strategy to support the community in time for change, and a plan to review and monitor the progress is the best option moving forward. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Winters. Another councillor like to speak to the motion, Councillor Fuller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I tread cautiously into this commentary, and I don't wish to throw stones in glass houses, as often I sit at this table guided by community sentiment, weighed up against perhaps a business case or technical information from educated officers. However, in the case of the contract that commenced in 2014, I'm unsure how this was seen as the best for the community over such a long, extended period. Moving forward, this step that we make tonight is progressive within our means as both a community and also an organisation, and I'm buoyed by the fact that we're proactively aiming to help with change.
Thank you, Councillor Fuller.
Madam Mayor, am I allowed to have a second go?
No, I'm asking the councillors.
I'd appreciate it if you would.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I just want to thank my colleagues. I really do echo what each and every one of you said. This has not been an easy decision to make, and there's a lot of factors that we have to take into consideration. And with the information forward as well, I will be supporting Councillor Foster's ultimate recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fitzpatrick. We've had a lot of discussion here around this particular issue, so I'm going to now ask councillors.
Madam Mayor, are you refusing me a second go?
Well, you've already spoken on the matter.
Yeah, I could solve the financial problem easy in the flick of a switch. I just put $1 on every animal that goes through the market carts, right? And $1 on every ticket sold at the PAC. Problem solved.
Would you please be seated? Councillors, we have a motion that's been put by Councillor Bussell and seconded by Councillor Benton. Are we all in favour? Thank you, councillors. I appreciate everyone's input. It's been a difficult decision to make, and I think, you know, it's as Councillor Maxwell said, it's not something that we've taken lightly, but something that we are looking towards moving forward in terms of the way that parking is delivered in the rural city of Wangaratta. So thank you for your support. Councillors, we'll now move to item number 15.4, which is the report for noting procurement exemption for the development contribution plan project. And I'm going to ask the CEO to perhaps give some background to this particular item.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This item relates specifically to work that is done in our residential growth areas. We have two of those, one in North West Wang and one in South Wang. Those areas are covered by a thing called a development contribution plan, which highlights infrastructure that's required in those growth areas and sets out an amount that the developers who are developing those areas will have to pay towards that infrastructure. The alternate to developers paying cash for their infrastructure is that sometimes they can do that work themselves in kind and get a credit on the cash payment. And the obvious example to that is rather than paying us to widen the road, the developer might say, I've got machinery and contractors here building roads, and I'm happy to do that work rather than pay you the cash and receive a credit. There isn't any money exchanged in hand in that situation. The developer's not paying us a contribution, we're not paying them for the work. So there's a question mark about whether our procurement policy strictly applies in that situation, but it is clear that procurement policy doesn't provide for work to be done that way. We will amend the procurement policy when it's next due and we'll make sure it incorporates this. But in the meantime, we're just transparently reporting to council that we've made an arrangement with developers to do that work on our behalf as an in-kind contribution. That all the normal checks and balances around value for money and quality of workmanship is in place like it would be at any other stage. It's just a good arrangement.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. Is there a question from the audience on this particular item before I ask the councillors to report the motion? If not, we have a recommendation, councillors. Would someone like to move, please? Councillor Fitzpatrick? Somebody second? Councillor Benton, thank you. Councillor Fitzpatrick, would you like to speak to this, please? Councillor Maxwell, would you like to?
Just to back up the CEO's word in relationship to the transparency in this, and to come forward and put it in front of the public and the council from the time, and get short for their insurance policy. And these things would to really take sure that this happens and set a whole thing up. So, again.
Thank you, Councillor Benton. Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In regard to the description and the oversight that our CEO has just provided, I just wanted to give that support that our council has an obligation to ensure oversight of all these matters. So for anyone perhaps in the gallery or in the public domain thinking that this is an opportunity where there may not be that oversight, can I just say that we are absolutely adamant that things particularly like this will require reports so that we can keep a close eye and ensure that we are meeting all obligations.
Thank you, Councillor Maxwell. Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? So we've got a recommendation, Council, moved by Councillor Fitzpatrick and seconded by Councillor Benton. Are we all in agreement? Thank you, councillors. We move now to item 15.5, which is planning permit application 24083, 31 4th Street, Wangaratta, the Creative Precinct. And the Director of Sustainability and Culture will speak to this.
Thank you. The planning permit application proposes to expand the existing performing arts and convention centre and gallery to develop what is known as the Wangaratta Creative Precinct. The proposal includes the reduction of car parking requirements and a variation of an easement to accommodate the development. Notice of the application was given as required by the Planning Environment Act, and the application was also referred to relevant authorities. 8 submissions were received, that includes 7 objections and 1 letter of support. The application and all related information, including the submissions, have been considered and assessed against the requirements of the Wangaratta Planning Scheme, and officers recommend that Council issue a notice of decision to grant the planning permit, subject to the conditions that are outlined in the attachment to the report.
Thank you, Director Swart. Do we have a question from the audience on this particular item? If not, councillors, someone to second. Councillor Fitzpatrick. Councillor Philip, you want to speak to?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is the next step in the process that's been going for pretty much all of the 8 previous years as a councillor, and I look forward to the future where we hopefully find some funding from any level of government to assist this progression. Thank you.
Well, it has, and I think, you know, it's been a long time in the making, and it's something that we're looking forward to seeing come to fruition. Obviously, funding is going to be critical to any of that happening. Perhaps it's something that we could consider doing in a staged way, but, you know, our vision for this particular development is one that is going to add significantly to the social and artistic fabric of the rural city of Wangaratta, and I'm hoping that we'll see it realised in the very near future. So we've got a recommendation that's moved by Councillor Fuller and seconded by Councillor Fitzpatrick. Are we all in agreement?
item number 15.6, which is the tourism events funding, grant funding correction. So that's just a operational housekeeping matter to be cleaned up. Councillor, Director Swart.
Thank you. The purpose of this report is to correct an error within the recommendation and subsequent resolution from the December council meeting about tourism event funding. The incorrect event applicant was identified within the resolution for the Wangaratta Cruise Night event. And to correct this error, it's recommended that council amends the December resolution to reference the correct applicant.
Is there a question from the audience on this particular item? If not, we've got a recommendation that someone like to move. Councillor Bassel. Councillor second. Councillor Maxwell. Councillor Bassel, with respect to this.
Just briefly, thanks, Madam Mayor. It's very important. If we incorrectly stated something, we mess up the correct. Thank you.
Councillor Maxwell. Councillors, we have a motion that's been put by Councillor Bassel and seconded by Councillor Maxwell. Are we all in agreement? Thank you, councillors. We now move to item 18.1, which is the minutes of advisory committee meetings.
Thank you, Mayor. This item is to bring to the council table minutes from some audit and risk committee meetings, arts and culture committee meetings that happened across September, August and December, and those minutes are provided here for council's noting.
Thank you, CEO. Councillors, we've got a recommendation. Would someone like to move that? Councillor Benton. Questions from the audience? No, pretty straightforward. Councillor Benton, you've moved. Councillor Winters, you're going to second. Councillors, moved by Councillor Benton and seconded by Councillor Winters. Are we all in agreement? Thank you, councillors. We now move to public question time, and I have got a couple of questions here in front of me already. One from Rod Hogan. Re the C86 planning scheme amendment, rezoning of public park recreation zone to public use zone for the construction of a sewage treatment facility. Does council consider it appropriate and justifiable for the proponent, Uselake Proprietary Limited, to financially benefit from the rezoning of public recreation land and to satisfy sewage treatment requirements necessary to facilitate the development of 233 plus lots on Lot 2, PS 744661D, the privately owned property? Director Swart.
The Planning and Environment Act allows proponents to propose planning scheme amendments. In this case, the proposal includes the development of an integrated water management system to facilitate not only the development of the proponent's land, but also development beyond their land. The merits of the proposal will be considered by an independent panel, and the panel will make recommendations to council.
Thank you, Director Swart. I've also got a question from June Anderson. Re C86 planning scheme amendment, open space equity. Looking at the width of the streets and the quality of park and green spaces within Arlington Park Estate, and from the images reported on the advertising board for Stage 5 of Walking View Estates, also used on real estate website, why is council willing to accept, excuse me, the absolute bare minimum 5% open space requirements of development on the southern side of Wangaratta? Do you want your legacy as a councillor to be represented by the bare minimum?
Thank you again for that question. The Wangaratta planning scheme requires an open space contribution of 5% for residential subdivisions. The proposal makes provision for more than 5% of open space. The merits of the proposal will be considered by an independent panel, and the panel will make recommendations to council.
I've also got a question from Jenny Hart, re C86, Planning Scheme Amendment, Planning Panel Representation. Have Council engaged the services of an external planning consultancy company to represent Council at the Planning Panel hearings scheduled in March and May 2025? If Council has engaged external consultants, please explain why the objective of why and the objective of such a representation.
Thank you again for that question. Council has not engaged an external consultant to represent it at the panel hearing.
Okay, I've got a question here from Tony Roman. C86, Planning Scheme Amendment, Traffic Management. When Mills Creek Drive was initially built, the road was not designed for the traffic capacity of the high density proposed of planning 2024. At least 1/3 of the 233 lots, approximately 76 lots, will use the shortest route to enter and exit via Mills Creek Road, then up Williams Lane or onto the smaller residential roads, Bradbury Drive, Thomas Lynch Drive, Donovan Drive towards Cribs Road. What is Council's plan for managing the increased traffic volumes in these local streets and the increased traffic flow onto Murdoch Road?
Thank you for that question. Council required a traffic impact assessment to be completed and submitted with the proposal. Submissions were received about that aspect during the public exhibition of the proposal. The independent panel will consider this and other relevant issues and make recommendations to Council about the merits of the proposal.
Okay, I've got.
I'll respond.
Well, you can ask a question.
Yes, come on.
Just introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Tony Roman, 27 Mills Creek Drive, Wangaratta. Under the current design by the developers, Mills Creek Drive is linked to Clark's Lane by a series of streets. Okay, so anybody on at Clark's Lane, if they really want to, they can come down through Mills Creek Drive. My question to Council, they make a recommendation to the developers that they can continue with Mills Creek Drive into the subdivision, but into a court. Okay, but whatever that court goes into, how many lots that will be, they will travel back out through Mills Creek Drive and segregate Clark's Lane as a separate entry and exit, but only X amount of houses of Mills Creek will go into a court and they'll exit out that way. Currently, the connection there between Mills Creek and Williams Lane is a fairly bottleneck already at certain times with certain businesses in those areas. There's a new bike track goes across Mills Creek Drive as well, with kids using those bike tracks to get to the Cathedral College. If we could turn Mills Creek into a court, continuing the subdivision, turn into the court to reduce the number of cars that can actually go down Mills Creek Drive. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. I think it's important to just reflect on where we are at in this process. So at the last council meeting, council made a resolution to send this proposal to an independent panel. Before that decision was taken, all the submissions were considered and also provided to the proponent, and the proponent had an opportunity to make changes to the proposal in response, and they chose not to do so in some respects, knowing that the panel process is an option moving forward. So since council at the last meeting decided that this proposal should go to an independent panel, that is the place where further changes like that one should be discussed. A panel would have the opportunity to make recommendations to council about the way the proposal should be changed, and council would have to consider those recommendations down the line. We wouldn't be making those recommendations at this point in the process.
Okay, I've got enough. If you'd like to come forward and ask your question, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If I could just get a clarification on your response, then please, Director Short. When submitters have their go to the panel hearing, my understanding is we're each allocated only 10 minutes. So if council could engage with submitters to give us some advice on how we therefore introduce such complex concepts and get our message across to the panel in our 10-minute window. If we can follow up with some meetings with you afterwards, not necessarily tonight, but in the coming days as the panel hearings are imminent, that would be very much appreciated.
I would be happy to have a conversation with you about the panel process and how that works. We would unfortunately not be able to give you advice as to how to make your submission or how to go about making your arguments at panel, and that would be up to you. The panel process is controlled by Planning Panels Victoria, and they set the rules around those. So you would have received correspondence from them directly, and they may have asked you questions like, do you actually want to talk to your submission or not? And then they allocate time in accordance with that. But I would, just to go back to where I started, I would be very happy to talk to anybody about how that planning process works.
Thank you. Obviously, it's very important, this complex feedback that submitters would like to give, and we obviously only get the 10 minutes to express the time to figure out if there's alternative ways to also definitely submit those suggestions. So appreciate it.
I've got another question here from Luca Grassi, reading C86 Planning Scheme Amendment, Integrated Water Management Facilities. If the integrated water management facility is to be constructed for sewage treatment is claimed to be a sustainability innovation, why isn't the facility being placed within the land being subdivided for the use and benefit of the 233 subdivided lots and their immediate surrounds? Given all other subdivisions in Wangaratta are now required to put sewage tanks underground in their own subdivided land area, why is this facility being placed on public land and constructed as an above-ground facility? Director Swart.
Firstly, I just mentioned that the underground sewage tanks referred to that are associated with other residential developments elsewhere in Wangaratta, all located within public land. In case of this planning scheme amendment, the proposed sewage solution will be further considered through the independent panel process.
Can I say something? Just quickly.
Just identify yourself for the...
Lucan, with my question. Now, I just can't comprehend how they could justify putting a treatment plant with a pond on parkland, and they tried to rezone the parkland to allow this. And there's plenty of opportunity on the other side of Clark's Lane. It's all farmland, it's not in between housing. They're trying to put this in between homes. And it's closer to existing houses than the new subdivision by the plans the council's got. So I'm not against it, this is in the wrong spot. So put it in the paddock, far away, not in between homes. Like it's not logic that you just put an open treatment plant, or partly open, with a pond on public parkland.
Yeah, I'll say a few things. One is that, again, just to reiterate that this proposed facility will facilitate not just this development, but development beyond that. It will also have additional public benefit in that it will produce recycled water that can be used for irrigation on sports fields, including council sports facilities, but also at the school there. The issue about location is that this is the proposal that we have in front of us. So this is the proposal that would have to be considered and will be considered through the panel. Now, I mentioned a few times tonight, quite boringly so, that the panel will look at the merits of this proposal and make recommendations to council. That was just my way of reiterating that when it comes to the merits of any part of this proposal, including this part of the proposal, the panel is the right process right now. and council will look at those recommendations from the panel report when they become available.
I totally understand that, but I don't understand why they would have thought it was a good idea to put it where it's been zoned at the moment, or planned to be zoned. You've got paddocks, farmland.
There was only a proposal
You know,
at this stage.
Yes, I understand that, but you're planting the seed and not something
But
else.
that's why it's going to the panel for consideration, and then it needs to also then come back to council when the application is actually made.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Come forward, please. Just state your name, please.
My name's Jenny Kramer. I've got a question related to the traffic that this amendment goes through and what impact it's going to have on the surrounding streets. Currently, with Cathedral College there's 15 to 17 school buses going in there a day. My understanding is that if this goes through, the first stage of subdivision, the traffic may be coming out onto Murdoch Road. The second stage will have access to Clark's Lane. And the third stage can go Clark's Lane or go down to Green Road. In that short space from where stage 1 comes onto Murdoch Road, you have got 5, I think it's only 4 or 5 streets coming on before you even get to Cribs Road. Now with that amount of housing that's going to be built there and the size of the blocks, you are putting a lot of traffic into that area. So is council working with Vic Road, with the developers, to look at strategies as to how the local traffic, the ratepayers of Wangaratta, can get out of their streets and onto Murdoch Road? Thank you.
Yeah, I think my response will sound very similar to a previous response I provided, where council required a traffic impact assessment to be completed and submitted with the proposal. Now that impact assessment was completed and considered the impact on those types of things that you mentioned. I understand that people might not be entirely happy with what they are seeing in this proposal, not just from a traffic point of view, but also from a range of other perspectives. And the place to make your arguments about that is at the panel hearing.
Do council also, I'm not sure whether they have taken into account that there's more proposed subdivisions to happen just out in that area. I think it's 100 house plots roughly. That again is going to impact. So it is an issue that council needs to have input with the developers.
Absolutely, and it's something that council will discuss when we see the application in front of us, and we'll consider all the information and data that's been provided, and obviously the outcome of the panel as well.
And my second question is, when the traffic feasibility study was done, how recent was that? Was it within the last 2 years, or has it been further back? Because the traffic with subdivisions at Cornwall, Millimore, Oxley, a lot of people use that road, Murdoch Road also as a way into Bangladesh.
Yes, I'm aware, I'm not certain about the exact date, but I'm aware that some concerns were raised about when the traffic counts were done as part of that traffic impact assessment. I'm also aware that the proponents repeated some traffic counts because of that feedback. So, yes, unfortunately I don't have the exact date, but I am aware that there were some issues about when exactly traffic counts were taking place.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other questions from the audience?
Not about that topic, so is that okay?
Oh, absolutely. Change of scenery.
Okay. I just have a question on behalf of the Merrill Parking and Gardens Group. Wondering what the state of play is for the pumping system in the lagoons. I don't know whether council has been down to see the lagoons at the moment, but the water is terrible. It was terrible over the Australia Day weekend when we had the tennis tournament down there. So I'm just wondering what's happening. That's been over 12 months since we sort of Marcus and I had a conversation around. I know that's not a problem, but I just wanting an update on that.
And also the bit we've done on the actual levy bank itself. It's interesting actually. I was down at the park on that long weekend with the tennis people there and spoke to a number of people who'd come from elsewhere, and their comment was what a beautiful location and how fortunate we were in such a facility and location. But I'll ask Director Newman to update you on the pump.
Thank you for your question. There's been no further updates since I sent you an email on the 14th of the 1st, so I'm happy to read that out if you would like. As you know, flooding over the past few years has set up the Billabong significantly, which we traditionally used to pump water from fallen trees. Spread of Phragmites has also contributed. To address this, we installed a 65mm pump to draw water from the King River. To complement the 90mm system that currently exists, they're carefully trying to manage the water flow to prevent the Billabong from drying out. However, in dry periods, such as we've had over the last several months now, with the river levels dropping, the impact, this does impact the Billabong lagoon. It's further exacerbated by evaporation that not only just naturally occurs, but also occurs because we have to have the fountains running, and then we have a number of leaks within that lagoon system as well. So we'll continue to monitor and manage the water levels the best we can during these dry spells.
Yeah, thanks. I understand that, but the lagoon situation there is terrible. Like it's really, I don't know, there would be nothing living in that. I know it's not your fault personally. I know the weather, the climate, all that stuff. But the fountains they haven't been working. I know they were working sort of for a very short period of time in November. Many of us are down there. But it just seems to be deteriorating, not getting any worse. And I know that last year you talked about that and what you mentioned, and that was going to be, that you hoped that was going to be up and going by Easter last year. So that's sort of only 12 months. And I know you can't magically pull anything out of the, do anything more than what's engineeringly possible, but it just seems to be deteriorating to a level down there which looks terrible in terms of tourism. The other part of it is the walls of the lagoon are continuing to crumble, and I know that that's a budgetary issue as well, but we talked about that sort of probably about 15 months ago. I'm just wondering whether there's any money in the budget this year to repair some of those beautiful stone walls down there.
We'll be considering the budget in the next few weeks and months, and obviously in budget submissions which we'll also consider. There's a great list of a wish list that council will be looking at. Yes.
I think that. And I suppose we're just, as I know everybody sitting here is concerned about what that park looks like, and yes, people do love it, but we want the water to look a lot better than what it is.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, so the piece of work that we promised that we were doing has been installed. That's the 65mm pump line all the way down to the river. The reality is it just physically, once it gets as dry as it is, it just physically can't pump enough water up to continue maintaining the lagoons in a pristine fashion. We need to understand, again, and I know that you accept this, that it has been extremely dry. These things will dry out during dry periods. Part of the reason that the fountains haven't been running is to try to, one, not ruin the pumps, because obviously there's quite a lot of silt in the lagoons at the moment, but also to stop some of that evaporation. Now, it doesn't have a huge benefit, but it does have some benefit. We continue to try to manage the water levels in those lagoons, and what we really need is some rain.
you mentioned the frame lines. Can I just ask, is there some plan to remove, because I know it's encroaching further in to, and I know it does that because we don't have any flooding and it grows as it does at Woodland. Is there some plan with the gardening team to try and remove some of that? Because it's into the water lilies and into the...
Yes, there is. Now is not the time to do that because the ecosystem, as you've rightly pointed out down there, is pretty fragile without a significant amount of water. So yes, we have some plans to deal with some of the phragmites down there. It's just we need the water levels to be back up and much higher to do that. The other thing that it does cause, of course, when we remove the phragmites is it will cause a lot more cloudiness in the water, obviously, which then impacts the water quality and the animals that are in it. It will also reduce the amount of water in the lagoons, because obviously taking them out. So it does have a number of knock-on effects. That's why we just have to wait until we've got, reasonable rains over the winter period.
Seems clear. Okay. I've got another question here from a Tom James. A very large and old river was recently filled at 23 to 49 Harper Road. Are council aware of this removal of native vegetation? Were permits issued for its removal, and if so, why has nothing could possibly be built on the land it occupies? If no permits were issued, what is council's response to the illegal removal of this ancient tree? It should be noted that other native vegetation has been removed and large limbs and boughs from other river red gums have been cut. Will the arborists who undertook the work be questioned if the works did not have permits, as they also should be held responsible for illegal works and should not be able to claim influence? I trust this removal will be investigated by council and action taken if found to be without permits. Director Swart.
Thank you for that question. Council officers have been in contact with the owners of the land about this matter. The owners are of the view that the removal of the vegetation on the land did not require planning permits, as it's exempt under the Wangaratta planning scheme. Council officers have commenced the process of confirming this.
Thank you, Director Swart. Are there any other questions from the audience?
I'm Joan McKenzie, I live in Christ Lane, and I didn't make a submission bid when all submissions were supposed to be done because I was cancer. If anybody's gone through the walk, you know, you're not going to worry about the development, you know, the salary street. So I only took notice of what was happening over the road from me when it was in the Chronicle in December. And I thought, wow, because I saw the plans. And the plans didn't have any green space or anything like that. So that's my concern. My concern is the green space. Anyhow, I went and I had a chat with neighbours. And she took my late submission and she was going to hand it on because it was late. And I was just wondering if I could read it out.
No, this is public question time.
Yeah, I know that I have more questions in it. So.
Well, if you could actually address a question to council.
Okay. Well, I'm really concerned about the quality of the life. The people that are going to live in that estate, because there is no, the houses, some of them are 300 square metres, and there's not going to be any room for any of those children to go outside and play in the backyard or anything like that. And there's no green space for those children to actually go and play, or anything like that.
It's interesting though that there's a demand though for smaller lot sizes, and I think most estates now offer a variety of lot sizes to cater for people's different demands. people who are older that don't want a garden or anything to look after will often opt for something smaller. But yeah, hearing your comments about green space, again, Director Swart, probably to reiterate the message that you've been giving everyone this evening.
Yes, I can do that one more time. Look, I think in terms of the design of the proposal, it certainly does include a variety of lot sizes, including smaller ones. And that's a requirement under the planning scheme to ensure that there's, I guess, housing products on the market for different uses or different needs. So not everybody needs a 700 square meter lot and a 4-bedroom house. There's needs for other types of products as well from a housing perspective. In terms of green space, I mentioned before that we require a contribution of 5%. This proposal is actually above the 5% within the planning scheme. Now, people will have views about whether that's enough, but the question that will be asked is, does it meet the requirements of the planning scheme? In terms of whether the rest of the design meets the requirements of the planning scheme, that's exactly the question that the panel will turn their minds to, and they will make recommendations if they feel like changes will need to be made to the design. The panel could also make recommendations about whether this proposal should go ahead at all.
The green spaces are brown.
We've got a question.
And spaces inside.
Yeah.
You know?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Some people would have to go half cake between the green space. And if you've got little kids and things like that.
But then I guess if you've got little kids, you buy a bigger block and Okay, do you have another question? Because there are other people that want to ask a question.
No, that's it. I'm just concerned about the quality of the people who are living there and the green space being not
yes.
within that area. So that people can go and work on grass.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, do we have any more? Well, I think we've dealt with the question from you.
I'd like to have a chance for the question because that's something that Luke has pretty much did mine. But I'd like to, Rod Kogan, 17 Williams Lane, Wangaratta. When they had the meeting about this Tartaroo Apartments 2 years ago, they had an information night over at the softball park. They had it all spread out just like the plan is. And I was talking to North East Water, who was a representative there, and I asked him about the water. You talked about the grey water and everyone's going to benefit from it. Yeah, not everyone, that's correct. But he did, I said, what about the boards in the area? He said, we're going to decommission those boards in the area. So is that true? Because nothing's been said about that at all. And he was a representative of North East Water, who was North East Water are supposed to be looking after this facility that the developer will make.
Well, I can't speak on behalf of North East Water.
Well, that's right. So no one else has brought it up. You talk about it's going to be good for people to get water, but at the cost of people that have got boards. And we know how we need boards now because it's so dry. So have you heard that? No, that's right.
I have not heard anything about that.
But that's what the North East Water representative said to us, and that's the decision. The same plan is all in place, and above ground and everything like that. But decommission them. So everybody, if you've got bores, be careful, because that's what's...
Thanks, Rod.
Thank you very much.
We'll take it on notice, and obviously we'll be talking to North East Water as we do, but it's inappropriate for us to actually comment on a statement that they've made, so, but we will talk to North East Water to clarify the statement. So just one more question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wish to talk on that.
If you could state your name, please.
Yeah, John Bott. I'm a former municipal engineer, campaigner and land developer. So I have a bit of experience in this area. But the council had the opportunity to consider the rezoning of this this land separately to the development of it. But for some reason, and I'm not sure why, and perhaps you'll be able to enlighten me, you've actually agreed to consider a rezoning and redevelopment in one parcel. And that effectively takes away a lot of the opportunity for the public to object to whether they want the rezoning from a low density area to a residential area, and the consequences of that, which obviously affect lot sizes, socio-economic development in that area. So council's obviously agreed to consider that, and I know, yes, it's going to go to a panel, and the panel will consider the merits of it, but it has a lot of implications to council. In 2006, there was a very fast-moving grass fire that came from the Hume Freeway and decimated that area. That area was decimated and went right up to Mill Street Road. The traffic that was generated by the subdivision in that area that was already there, they couldn't get out quick enough. People couldn't escape the area. You're putting a residential development into that area, abutting a rural area, which in turn immediately abuts the freeway. There's been a number of fires generated on that freeway, even in recent times. It's only a matter of time that the wind direction comes from there, goes straight into the area that's going to be developed. There was a question asked about the treatment of sewage. That sewage treatment plant, yes, I understand it's going to put water onto the ovals. That's great in summer. In winter, they don't want the water. The sewage treatment plant will flow untreated, and hopefully it doesn't malfunction, but it will flow into the 1 Mile Creek. There's platypus in that area. I've seen them. We've got documentation of the platypus in that area. If there's a malfunction of that sewage treatment plant, it's going to impact on those, and I'd like to know whether the relevant authorities have been told of this and whether it's been investigated. The subdivision is going to create, on average, 10 vehicle movements per day per property. Now, all that traffic is going into the area. You're putting a very dense development in there by turning it into residential development. And that has to be considered. And the Pikes Lane, where it abuts Murdoch Road, there's no turning lanes there, there's no beaches there that are shown on the plan. Everyone says, oh, someone else will do that. I think the council have made a mistake in considering this together as a rezoning and a development. I'd just like to know why you did that.
Yes, certainly. Early on, when this proposal was discussed with us at council, we certainly considered not doing a combined process and having the land proposed for rezoning first, which would go through the similar process to the one that we are following now. So people would have an opportunity to have to say about the rezoning only. They would have no details about what is being actually proposed on the land in terms of how it's designed, lot sizes, where open space is going to be, where roads will be. None of that would be available. And the other thing that we wouldn't know anything about is the way sewage treatment would work in this case. Because of that and the public benefit that was talked about relating to the treatment of sewage and recycled water being made available to irrigation, and also the additional capacity that sewage treatment plant will deliver for development outside of this land, we thought it would be better to do a combined process. That way people get the full picture of what's being proposed, and we also get an opportunity to, I guess, safeguard some of those community benefits through planning permit conditions. Now, planning permit conditions, draft planning permit conditions was exhibited as part of this proposal. And to me, that's a big opportunity for people to look at. If this development goes ahead, these are all the conditions that will have to be met. And those conditions could be amended potentially by the panel, so the panel could recommend changes to those conditions. So an example of that is if you feel like if infrastructure upgrades haven't been addressed sufficiently in the draft planning permit conditions, that's something that the panel could look at and provide us with some recommendations to improve on. So in my mind, there were very clear reasons for us to say, let's put the entire development out to the community in one go, not just a rezoning with no detail about what potentially goes on that land in the future.
Thank you, John. Any other questions? I've got another question. I'll take one more question.
Yeah, I'll seek clarification. Colin Henderson. Director Stewart made a couple of comments just a minute ago in regards to the sewage treatment plant. Obviously, there's something the rest of us don't know, he may be aware of. You said the sewage treatment plant is for this development and the development beyond. What is that development beyond? At the moment, there's a 400 lot subdivision. What is the other development?
Director Swart.
If I'm remembering correctly, this proposal is for 233 residential lots, and the proposal is that the treatment plant would provide an additional capacity for another 100 lots outside of this land.
Where's that 100 lots coming from?
It hasn't been identified. It just provides additional capacity within our system to accommodate another 100 lots. As you know, that capacity in our sewage system has been a challenge for us for a few years, and this is a way to help with that.
So are we, all right, discuss school gets water, other people may use water during the summertime, winter time we've got an excess of water. Are we going to have, or how are we going to prevent another Wangaratta sausage factory spreading into the community?
Yeah, sorry, that's one of the points that was made before about, what happens in winter time. Does the access water go into the creek? That's certainly the proposal at this point in time. One thing to note is that this facility will need to meet all EPA requirements. So the water will have to be treated to a specific standard before it can be released into the creek. They will have to get an EPA license before they can go ahead with the operation of this facility.
One question not related to this, if possible. I'm also a member of the Wangaratta Woodworkers Club, and members there spent countless hours without billing the council for restoration of the gates to now on display out in the park. We were told that there was going to be covering for those gates to preserve them for the future. When will there be covering put in place to prevent further damage and degradation of the gates?
I've never heard that, but
the heritage is sitting there rotting away after countless of hours, which we didn't build the council for, as a tribute.
Well, we certainly appreciate that, but what I'm saying, Colin, is that we don't know about that, and I appreciate you asking the question.
Could there be coverage for the gates in the future?
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. Thank you. I've actually got one more question, and that's directed to Director Goonan, and it's regarding the draft gambling policy and asked for adopted in full. And the second question was the rural city of Wangaratta membership as a council with the Alliance for Gambling Reform as promised at the March 2024 meeting at Whitfield. My last inquiry in October 2024 said the council was in discussion with the AGR. Has the membership been finalised?
Thank you for your question, Jill. Yes, the gambling policy was adopted in full at the March 2024 council meeting. As far as the membership for the Alliance for Gambling Reform, no, it has not been finalised yet. Council officers met with the AGR in May 2024, received the membership outline, confirmed our intent to join and requested an invoice. We followed up in June with that. For that invoice, we again followed up in November and December for that invoice. We are still to receive a response. We plan to reach out to the AGR again early next month.
Thank you, Director Gooney. If there aren't any further public questions, can I thank everyone for coming here tonight and raising your issues of concern. I mean, it is always very difficult to be able to answer every question in the way that people would like the answer to be given, but certainly appreciate your interest and your concern. And the fact is that this isn't the only forum for council to engage with its community around issues of concern. And it was stated earlier that there are a number of things that perhaps as council we weren't aware of because we weren't made aware of what the issue might be. So, we try to be all things to all people as much as we possibly can and ensure that things are done in the best possible way. So, again, thank you for your attendance tonight and I look forward to our next meeting and I'll formally close the meeting tonight.